webinar is part one of a two-part series in conjunction with IARPIC's Monitoring, Observing, Modeling, and Prediction Collaboration Team on the integration of observations and modeling in the Arctic. The next meeting is at the end of July, so be on the lookout for that invitation. So this meeting highlights the modeling work of biospheric-focused NASA airborne missions, both Above and FORTE. And these missions are in two very different phases of operations. Above is nearing completion, and FORTE has recently been selected. So Arctic Coastlines, Frontlines of Rapidly Transforming Ecosystems, FORTE, was recently selected as a NASA Earth Venture suborbital mission to apply the unique advantages of high-resolution, ecosystem-scale, suborbital, passive, and active remote sensing observations to explicitly link hydrological, biochemical, and ecological processes in the Arctic land-ocean system. And then Above, the Arctic-Boreal Vulnerability Experiment is broadly focused on gaining a better understanding of the vulnerability and resilience of Arctic and boreal ecosystems to environmental change in Western North America and providing the scientific basis for informed decision-making to guide societal responses at local to international levels. So we're going to start with the presentation by FORTE. Dr. Maria Tortuza, I'm sorry, Maria, I butchered your last name, you will correct me, is an endowed professor at the City University of New York, and she's the PI of the FORTE mission, and she'll be taking the lead off on the presentation. And Dr. Dustin Carroll is the project director at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories, which is associated with San Jose State University, and is the modeling lead for the FORTE team. Their talk is entitled NASA Frontlines of Rapidly Transforming Ecosystems, the FORTE Modeling Framework. And then I'm going to quickly also introduce Dr. Woo Sun, who is a research scientist at Carnegie Institute. Well, I'll do Woo. I will introduce you at the next round. So go ahead, Dustin and Maria, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura and Dustin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. I'm Maria Giorgio, as Lauren said, the lead PI for the FORTE mission, affiliated with the City University of New York and NASA Goddard. And I will provide a brief introduction to this new NASA Earth Venture suborbital mission. Dustin Carroll from San Jose State University leads our science team's modeling efforts, and he will discuss in more detail our modeling framework. Next slide, please. As we all know here, the Arctic is getting warmer, wetter, less frozen, and hit by more extremes. These extreme changes on land, in the ocean, in riverine hydrology and biogeochemistry impact strongly the Arctic coastline, one of the most critical areas on Earth for energy resources, transportation, security, subsistence activities, and biodiversity. Yet the Arctic land-ocean interface still remains poorly characterized with high uncertainty in model predictions. And to a large extent, this is because these coastlines are quite remote and really challenging to access. Next slide, please. So multidisciplinary, multi-platform observing technologies are necessary to explore this rapidly transforming ecosystem. And this is our goal in FORTE, to combine remote sensing observations from airborne and satellite platforms with state-of-the-art models, as well as AI tools and other cutting-edge observing technologies, including high-tech research vessels, helicopter deployments, small boats, autonomous systems, and use all of these assets, all of these tools to understand how environmental change is impacting this region and beyond. Next slide, please. So the overarching science questions we're asking in FORTE are: how do nearshore Arctic ecosystems, from lower watersheds to coastlines and adjacent seas, respond to changes in the mobilization, magnitude, composition, and seasonality in land-ocean fluxes? And what are the implications for marine resources, coastal communities, industries, as well as larger-scale ocean processes? Next slide. Now, much of what is known about the shifting seasonality, the sharp temporal transitions, the spatial heterogeneity that characterize Arctic coastlines comes from measurements in the big six Arctic rivers. Yet more than 40% of riverine discharge in the Arctic originates from smaller rivers, such as the Colville River on the north slope of Alaska. This hydrodynamic model simulation you see here shows the Colville system and how it really fires up with sharp temporal, spatial transitions in salinity, temperature, ice area. All of these changes compressed between a few months from May to October. FORTE focuses on these sharp spatiotemporal transitions across this very dynamic continuum of Alaska's northernmost ecosystems. These eroding coastlines, the smaller rivers, their deltas, their estuaries, that really connect the Alaskan changing terrestrial systems to the coastal Arctic Ocean. Next slide, please. Our science in FORTE is driven by three thematic research areas. The first research area focuses on the impact of changing discharge and coastal erosion on land-ocean fluxes and spatiotemporal transitions in sources and sinks of carbon and energy. The second research area deals with the relative importance and interplay of coupled physical biogeochemical processes in transforming these fluxes, especially as environmental conditions change in the Arctic. And the last research area explores the response of phytoplankton populations to these changing conditions, also as relates to harmful algal blooms and impacts on marine resources and food security. Now, addressing these research objectives requires observations from different platforms. Next slide, please. Airborne measurements, both from crewed and uncrewed systems, are necessary to capture the changing conditions across this continuum of rivers, deltas, coastal waters, especially during the spring freshet when these coastlines are particularly challenging to access. Shipborne and other surface as well as laboratory measurements are needed for more detailed optical and biogeochemical measurements, for phytoplankton characterization and growth, as well as to quantify transformation rates. Satellite observations are necessary to capture processes at larger spatial, longer temporal scales, and then, of course, modeling for improved predictions. Next slide, please. Now, this integration of measurements from different platforms and methods will allow FORTE to capture processes at different scales, from the sub-micron, sub-nanoscale with observations of dissolved organic matter and phytoplankton in the water, to measurements and modeling of the entire ecosystem, with results being used to address global scale impacts and feedbacks. Next slide. You see here our study domain. This is in the North Slope of Alaska. We focus on the four main river systems along this coastline, the Sag, Kuparuk, Colville, and Canning. The time period for our measurements extends from the spring freshet to the late summer. This is our first year of the program. We're planning intensive field work in 2027 and 2028, and 1 year of synthesis in 2029. Next, Dustin will discuss how modeling efforts will help us address our objectives and science questions.
Great. Thank you, Maria, for that super nice introduction of the FORTE mission. So, as I mentioned, I'm Dustin Carroll. I'm leading the FORTE modeling component, which we're calling ECO-FORTE. And we're primarily focused on two main science questions with the modeling approach. So the first one is, how do the lateral fluxes and the chemical components of those fluxes shape the coastal ocean ecosystem, the physics, the phytoplankton, biogeochemistry along the coastal North Slope? And our hypothesis to test there is that the spring freshet really is the dominant driver. That large signal that Maria showed in the movie before, the modeling movie, really sets the tone and characterizes the unique physical biogeochemical dynamics of the region. And then the second question is focused on the time variability. So what are the effects of these climate perturbations that are happening across the Arctic and especially on the North Slope? How does land to ocean fluxes, sea ice decline, how do they affect coastal ocean ecosystems and the carbon balance in this region? And our hypothesis there is that the intensification of land to ocean fluxes plus sea ice decline has shifted the phytoplankton community structure towards smaller, more opportunistic species that can take advantage of lower nutrient concentrations and sea ice decline. And the tools we're going to use to provide the modeling framework is the first one's Echo-Darwin. So this is a NASA ocean biogeochemistry model. I'm the lead developer for this model. It's based on the estimating the circulation and climate of the ocean echo framework. And the key thing here is that the model is data assimilative. So it ingests both physical and biogeochemical observations. We're starting with a global solution here, and then I'll scale down into the FORTE region. We have a very flexible ecosystem model provided by the MIT Darwin Group. And all of this is an open source model. All the code instructions for running simulations is available online, so any group can go ahead and use this. And on the right-hand side, I'm just showing in the global model, the satellite and in situ observations that we assimilate into the model. So the green labels are the satellite physics, the blue are the in situ physics, and the red are the in situ biogeochemistry. So this entire observational suite is assimilated into Echo-Darwin to provide a best possible estimate of the ocean's biogeochemical and physical state. For the ecosystem side of things, we use the MIT Darwin Project model, which is a hyper-versatile biogeochemical and ecosystem model. It cycles through carbon, all the major nutrients, iron, through both inorganic and organic pools. There's phytoplankton that live, die, sink, hence the Darwin name. It's really a survival of the fittest ecosystem model. You can customize the ecosystem to have just a small number of phytoplankton, or up to 4,000 have been simulated before. We'll be specially adapting this model for the unique conditions of the North Slope and the Arctic Ocean. And importantly, it simulates radiative transfer through the water column. So now we have a direct link with the Darwin model to the FORTE and NASA hyperspectral products. And on the right-hand side is a visualization from the global Darwin model, just showing the complexity of phytoplankton communities across the global ocean, how they change seasonally, how they change in different ocean regimes, the spatial patterns, and the time-space evolution. So taken together, this forms Echo-Darwin. So the Echo model physics plus the Darwin ecosystem and biogeochemistry model. And here I'm just showing a global simulation of Echo-Darwin, showing air sea CO2 flux. So blue is where there's uptake of CO2 from the atmosphere. Red is where there is outgassing. You can see the synoptic storm systems driving intense CO2 air sea fluxes due to more efficient air sea gas exchange. And one other important thing in our modeling framework is that even though we assimilate data, all the properties are conserved, budgets are closed, there's no so-called nudging. So the model provides a physically consistent estimate that can be used for budgets. So moving into the coastal model that we'll be developing for FORTE, this is what we're starting with, right? Echo-Darwin, it's a global ocean setup. Here are the various assets that we assimilate. And in the FORTE mission, we will be downscaling this model to the North Slope at 500-meter resolution to provide a super high resolution, high fidelity cutout of the North Slope coastal ocean. We will be assimilating all of the major FORTE assets, the observations taken during the campaign, along with PACE, SWOT, and others. So this model will assimilate data. It has the radiative transfer component. It will have a customized Arctic ecosystem, full representation of sea ice, and the sea ice is also data constrained. We'll have land to ocean fluxes, budgets, and looking at mechanistic insights into the process scale understanding and also the longer term climate variability on the North Slope. So this is how we're going to transition. We're starting on the left-hand side with our global Echo-Darwin solution. It has roughly 18-kilometer resolution at high latitudes. It assimilates ocean ice biogeochemistry starting in 1992, the beginning of the satellite era, and it's going to provide the optimized initial conditions, boundary conditions, and forcing for our regional model. On the right-hand side, we have Echo-FORTE, which is our downscaled Echo-Darwin model. We'll have 500-meter horizontal resolution with 81 vertical levels with 0.5 or 1 meter vertical resolution at the surface. We'll have the Arctic ecosystem with radiative transfer. We'll have dynamic sea ice, landfast ice, and terrestrial export, and it will assimilate FORTE, SWOT, PACE, and more. And this work builds directly on our team's prior work in the Mackenzie River Delta, which we've been doing under NASA funding for a number of years here. And we will port all the lessons learned and successes and modeling technology from the Mackenzie Delta to the North Slope. And just to show an example of that, this is a simulation we've developed for the Mackenzie Delta. You can see different properties here: sea surface temperature, sea surface salinity, and then sea ice cover and sea ice thickness. And you can see the incredible fidelity in the sea ice leads, the cracks, the evolution of the Mackenzie River plume is shown in the sea surface salinity, the blue colors. And this is at 1 kilometer resolution. So we're going to go even finer for the FORTE campaign. And this is the type of fidelity, though, we can start to expect with the FORTE modeling efforts. You can see the incredible refreezing and melting processes along the Mackenzie Delta there and the sea ice cover as well. So an important part of this investigation is correctly and accurately characterizing the land to ocean fluxes. We're going to start with the permafrost water balance model for the North Slope. This is developed by Michael Rollins at UMass. And this is just a figure showing some very preliminary results from the proposal. But on the left-hand side, you can see the dissolved organic carbon concentrations for the 4 major North Slope rivers for both spring and summer. The red are observations, and the blue is the permafrost water balance model. So we have very nice agreement on a seasonal scale between these rivers. The middle panel is showing the discharge at a seasonal scale, so time series, showing the matchup between the observations and the model. And then on the right-hand side, I'm showing the annual discharge, right? So the intensification of the discharge in the last few decades in this region. So these rivers have been intensifying due to increased ice melt, permafrost melt, hydrological cycle intensifying across the Arctic. So that's what we're going to start with. Then we are going to feed this into an estuarine model. So this is, if you put the cursor on A, this is our representation of a river estuarine delta model. We call this NSRAD, so North Slope River Aquatic Delta Model. This is based on an estuarine model called CGEM, which we've used in the past, has been successfully applied to many global river estuarine systems. If you look at panel B, this is an initial simulation of the Colville River. So what you're seeing is a Hofmüller plot with the time on the y-axis and the distance from the mouth on the x-axis. And we implemented a river ice component. So you see that the CO2 flux, which is shown in the colors there, is arrested during the ice-covered region timing of the year. And then during river ice breakup, you have a large CO2 outgassing event. And then there's 3 components we'll be fusing into this estuarine model. The orange is the upstream land estimates. So that's the permafrost water balance model, plus additional products to get after nutrients and sediments. Then we'll have the delta and the estuary. So this is where we have the estuarine mixing model that takes those upstream inputs and applies an estuarine filter and accounts for the transformations across the estuary. And then this will be optimized with all of the FORTE data for the 4 major rivers. And then these will be used as inputs into the Echo-Darwin or Echo-FORTE coastal model. And so our deliverable here will be optimized North Slope River Aquatic Delta model, which will provide estimates from 1992 to near present, with uncertainty bounds on the lateral fluxes of freshwater, carbon, nutrients, and sediment for all the 4 North Slope rivers. In terms of our model assimilation and optimization, we're starting with the coastal model on the left-hand side here. So we'll have the coastal model forced with the optimized lateral fluxes. We'll run this model from 1992 to 2026, and then extend it as the new data from FORTE arrive. We'll be assimilating FORTE data plus SWOT and PACE and other ocean color data sets. We'll use a Green's function optimization to adjust the initial and boundary conditions of the model, and also the model parameters, such as the ecosystem and phytoplankton parameters, to best match the observations. We're going to be running a suite of sensitivity experiments so we can isolate the impact of riverine DOC, sediment, CDOM, erosion, etc., and examine how these processes one by one impact the coastal ocean of the North Slope. And then finally, we'll provide fully closed 3D budgets of carbon, nutrients, phytoplankton to get after the mechanistic drivers that are causing these changes. And so there's really 3 key observation streams. FORTE on the seasonal scale on the left-hand side. So FORTE ship, air, drone. These are the vertical profiles of temperature, salinity, velocity, carbon, and hyperspectral ocean color. Then we have daily SWOT data, which we'll use for sea surface height and surface ocean velocity to help constrain the river plume and the nearshore circulation and mesoscale features. And then we'll finally use PACE, the ocean color products, their estimates of phytoplankton functional types, and all of these will be used to assimilate into the model and improve its fidelity. And just as a teaser here, I'm going to show some results from a new global high-resolution simulation. This is led by Daniel Witt at NASA Ames and my co-I, Dimitri Menamenelis. And here we're showing a movie of sea surface salinity during the summer season. And you can see the fresh signal from the coastal plumes in the North Slope region. You can see the intruding boundary current coming up from the Bering Strait. You can see the intense mixing and salinity gradients that are basically combining with these two. And also, I'll rewind a bit. You can see the sea ice breakup here and the leads and cracks that are forming. These are the types of features that we will be resolving with even finer scale in our ECO-FORTE modeling approach. And just to show another movie, this is also showing sea surface salinity here. And what you're going to see is the black lines show the bathymetry. So first takeaway is there is a very steep slope, right? And a continental shelf goes into the abyss there quite rapidly. And then in the white, you'll start to see lines that represent sea ice cover. So now you're starting to see the sea ice breakup during the summer. It's getting transitioned and advected around and eventually clears out of the region. And then you have really intense eddy activity along the slope where there's been intense mixing due to salinity gradients. So this is just giving a foresight of what's to come with our ECO-FORTE modeling approach. We're so excited to start this project. If you have more questions or you want more information on the FORTE mission, you can visit the FORTE website. There's a QR code on the bottom left or contact Maria. And just thank you for your time. This is me a long time ago sampling the Koparik River up on the North Slope. I used to do field work at Toolik Field Station for a number of years, and I'm so excited to be coming back to the region for a modeling investigation. So thank you.
Thanks, Dustin and Maria. It was a great talk. We have time for a couple questions. There's one in the chat already. Lewis, would you like to ask your question aloud?
Well, sure. So I'm curious as to what the primary sources, spatial patterns, and magnitudes of regional biases are in Echo-Darwin. I'm taking an objective look at the Echo-Darwin model to better understand its strength, limitations, and overall reliability for scientific applications. And forgive me, I'm the lead Earth system scientist for Headquarters Air Force Weather.
Excellent. So yes, I mean, with any model, right, there are biases, there are issues, and especially since it's a global optimization, there's compromises that need to be made. One thing that we do that's unique is we provide a full evaluation document of all of the comparison with the in situ data globally.
Excellent.
So we have a very detailed document. I can send you the link to that. You can zoom into your study region of interest and see these biases. They're all documented. They're all open source and transparent. And, we have a large team working on Echo-Darwin. So new versions are coming out all the time, and we're constantly learning and increasing the fidelity of the global solution. So I would say, yes, there are biases in many regions, but we know of them and we try to make them as transparent as possible.
Would this include items like quantitative metrics, independent holdout data sets?
We definitely have quantitative metrics in the evaluation document, and then holdout data sets. I've done some of this using independent data sets, especially the new measurements of air sea CO2 flux that are coming out in the Southern Ocean. I can send you those if you're interested. Some of the matchup looks very good.
Oh, absolutely. That would be excellent to see.
Yeah, please reach out. I'd love to chat more about that.
Okay.
Great. Maybe one more question if anyone has it. Okay, I have one quick question.
Sure, Lauren.
Yeah, so I'm always curious when you're assimilating so many observations from satellite, right? And then you're going to take maybe a year with, a few flights from airborne. Like, what is the impact? Are you guys planning on any sensitivity studies around like how much, improvement or impact in your O-F are you going to get from like including airborne observations or not? Something that I've always thought about.
Absolutely. So we have an Aussie component kind of in the proposal, and the idea is to be able to tease apart, which we can do with our data assimilation framework, which observations are key for adjusting the model, right? And which observations perhaps need to be weighted more heavily than others to get basically the correct ocean biogeochemical state. So we will definitely be providing insight into FORTE and NASA for how valuable these observations are, right? And exactly which ones are critical for modeling efforts.
Great, thanks. Okay.
Looks like Wilbert had one more
Yeah,
question,
Wilbur,
which I
you
can,
wanna?
yeah.
I think we have enough time, so we'll go ahead. Go ahead, Dustin.
Sure. So Wilbur, I'll go back to the beginning here. Yes, the BGC is data constrained, and this slide here up top shows basically the data constraints. And for the global solution, we use the SOCAT PCO2 product, which is global. We use bioargo profiling floats, and then we use all the available in situ profiles from the GLODAP product as well, which are these kind of, cross-basin ocean transects. And this is all assimilated and feeds into adjusting the model biogeochemistry in the ecosystem.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Or do we have one more question?
How long can we hold it until the end? So thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Awesome. So next we have Dr. Wu Sun, who is a research scientist at the Carnegie Institute for Science. His research focuses on the carbon cycle in terrestrial ecosystems. And he is really interested in understanding how under climate change, whether the terrestrial biosphere will continue serving as a carbon sink. So Wu, go ahead and share your screen. His talk is entitled Informing Arctic-Boreal Land Carbon Flux Estimates Using Atmospheric Benchmarks.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes, they look great.
Yeah. So thanks very much for the IARCIC collaboration for inviting me to talk about findings from our above project. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to share our research on using atmospheric observations to constrain land carbon flux patterns over the North American Arctic-Boreal domain. And this project was supported by the NASA ABOVE program, and I would also like to thank my co-authors and our collaborators from multiple institutions. So what motivates our project is the large uncertainty in predicting how climate change impacts the Arctic-Boreal carbon cycle. So we use terrestrial biosphere models to project the future changes in the ecosystems. But these models have large uncertainty in future projections because they don't represent the current fluxes very well. As you can see from the divergence across models used in the Global Carbon Budget report, this is just a zoom in on the Western North America Arctic Boreal region. And there are some major challenges we're facing. One is that models disagree on the space-time patterns of carbon fluxes, which has been known before the above campaign, and it remains a perennial problem. And key processes such as permafrost carbon cycling are not well resolved in these models. And also, more importantly, the evaluation of models typically relies on ground-based flux observations, typically from eddy currents towers, which have small footprints and are too sparse to constrain large-scale carbon flux patterns, especially in the Arctic Boreal domain. And we need to bring in observational constraints that could inform large-scale flux patterns. And this is exactly what we're doing with our above project. So just a little bit background. So NASA's Arctic-Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, or ABOVE, is a cross-scale study of Arctic boreal ecosystem changes. And through its unique strategy of scaling observations from leaf to orbit, ABOVE enables us to address some of the longstanding challenges in carbon cycle modeling through a multi-scale perspective. And we are currently at the very end of the final phase of ABOVE. So we can look at things more from a rear mirror perspective. But I imagine all the data collected through ABOVE will be crucial for model development for many years to come. And I don't have time to discuss all the cool things that the modeling working group are doing under ABOVE. But with this talk, I wanted to highlight our phase 3 project, which specifically looks at using the previously underutilized atmospheric observations to constrain carbon flux patterns at model relevant temporal and spatial scales. So to link modeled carbon fluxes with atmospheric CO2 concentration observations, we use the Lagrangian back trajectory approach. So we have the breathing Arctic boreal ecosystems exchanging CO2 with the atmosphere. And different flux patterns predicted by different models can generate different CO2 distribution in the atmosphere. And now if we have the NASA aircraft to, for example, to measure CO2 concentrations, these measurements can tell us something about carbon fluxes in the upwind regions. And the influence region of a measurement is typically known as a footprint. And thanks to the work done by the CARV and above science teams, we have a trove of atmospheric observations and corresponding footprints that can be used to evaluate terrestrial basin models. And we're going to use this framework to evaluate how well carbon flux estimates from global carbon budget inversions and the trendy terrestrial basin models and also upscaled flux data products, how well do they represent atmospheric observations? So here are two figures showing the spatial representativeness of available CO2 observations in the domain. So the left-hand side figure is the cumulative footprint map for airborne observations from the CARV and Arctic Cap flights. And the right-hand side figure shows similar footprint coverage, but for tower observations from NASA, NOAA, and Environment Canada. So these are observations we use to evaluate models. And in a first study led by my colleague, Dr. Jiaming Wen, we find that the consistency between atmospheric CO2 observations and net ecosystem change estimates varies substantially across different modeling approaches. So this work was just published in Environmental Research Letters a couple of months ago. So here, each dot represents individual models, and we found that global atmospheric inversions show consistently high agreement with atmospheric concentration observations over the above domain. And in contrast, terrestrial basin models show large variance in their consistency with atmospheric observations. And the upscaled flux data products are something in between. Here we use the absorbed photosynthetically active radiation, APAR, to assess model performance. And we divide models into higher correlation and lower correlation groups. We use APAR because it's a first order driver of photosynthesis, and our expectation is that it would a process-based model with reasonably well-resolved processes should perform at least as well as APAR. But turns out this is not the case. And we will further diagnose what went wrong with the lower correlation group of models. And we find that the consistency with atmospheric observations is strongly related to simulated NEE seasonal cycles shown on the left. And because global inversions typically show high consistency with atmospheric data, we use their ensemble mean as a reference, here plotted as the gray ribbons. We use these references to assess the NE seasonality bias of all the terrestrial biospheric models. And we find that the higher correlation models show similar NE seasonal cycles compared with the inversions. However, as the correlation degrades, models show more bias in their NE seasonality. And overall, we find that the correlation between models' consistency with atmospheric data and there's a strong correlation between models' consistency with atmospheric data and their NE seasonality bias. And for the models showing lower correlations, we identified three major types of seasonality bias compared with inversion, which we will explain next. So there are 7 out of the 12 lower correlation models showing an early bias in spring onset relative to the inversions and higher correlation models, as marked by the black boxes. And there are 5 models showing an early bias in the peak carbon uptake. So they typically show peak uptake in June, but the more observationally constrained seasonal cycles show peak uptake in July. And another 5 models show a late bias in autumn senescence. We have some further analysis to show that these seasonality biases are mostly attributed to bias in gross primary productivity, or GPP, and to a lesser extent to ecosystem restoration. And if you're interested in more details, I encourage you to check out our paper. And then in another ongoing study led by Jiaming, we used this framework to diagnose biases in carbon fluxes beyond the growing season, targeting carbon release from winter respiration, shown on the. So here we find that the mean bias relative to CO2 observations resulting from modeled fluxes, shown on the x-axis, is highly correlated with the model's winter respiration over the entire study domain, shown on the y-axis. And following the zero bias line, we can infer that the winter carbon release is about 0.38 petagrams carbon over the above domain. But if you look at all the models, they span a pretty wide range. This value corresponds very well to the ensemble median of atmospheric inversions, but this is higher than the ensemble median of terrestrial biospheric models. So this means that the terrestrial biospheric models may have underestimated the winter respiration consistent with previous site level observations. And it also demonstrates that the utility of atmospheric observations in diagnosing process level bias in terrestrial biospheric models at a scale that is relevant for model evaluation. And next, I'd also like to highlight the work by my colleague, Dr. Kelsey Foster, who just recently defended her PhD at Stanford. And here to find out where top-down and bottom-up models disagree in a robust way, Kelsey performed tests of statistical significance between inversions and terrestrial biospheric models. So she identified regions where inversions show stronger carbon uptake than terrestrial biospheric models in a statistically significant way, marked by the stippled region. And what's cool about this approach is that we found that the regions of statistical significance overlaps with 2 land cover types, permafrost and peatland soils in the top panel and croplands in the bottom panel, shown in the brown area. And the box plot on the right indicates difference between top-down and bottom-up models. So specifically, the aggregated differences over permafrost and the peatland regions account for about a quarter of the total discrepancy over North America, indicating that better representation of permafrost and the peatland carbon fluxes is key to reconciling top-down and bottom-up carbon flux estimates over North America. And this paper was just recently published in Global Biogeochemical Cycles. And we can also go a step further to examine responses of carbon fluxes to environmental variables beyond carbon budget themselves. So in another work currently in preparation by Kelsey, she uses atmospheric CO2 and methane observations to diagnose temperature responses of fluxes as simulated by process-based models. So each line on the figure represents a response of CO2 or methane fluxes to temperature from a model or observational data product. And the colored solid lines indicate responses derived directly from atmospheric observations. And the gray lines represent individual model responses. And the colored dashed lines indicate model ensemble mean response. So if we compare model responses with observation-derived responses, we can see that the temperature sensitivity of forest and shrub or tundra CO2 fluxes are reasonably well reproduced by both inverse models and process-based models, whereas temperature sensitivities of wetland methane fluxes show large model spreads and poor agreement between modeled and observation-derived flux responses. So this means there are more work to be done with methane representation in process-based models. And this is a work to be about to be submitted, so stay tuned. So to summarize, through a series of interrelated studies on CO2 and methane fluxes, we can see that atmospheric observations can help us diagnose model bias, not only in terms of seasonal cycles of fluxes, but also bias in biome-specific responses. And we show that consistency between carbon flux estimates and atmospheric CO2 observations depends largely on simulated seasonal cycles. This is something really basic, but turns out there are still some improvements to be made across the models. And getting peak and shoulder season timing right is key to the performance of these models. And also, in terms of biome-specific bias, we show that permafrost and peatland regions are key to reconciling top-down and bottom-up model discrepancies in the North American carbon budget and requiring more process level development in the models. And the model divergence is also greater in methane fluxes than in CO2 fluxes over the Arctic-Boreal domain. And last but not least, I'd also like to thank all the people who collected atmospheric observations and conducted footprint simulations and shared carbon flux data products. It takes a village to make this project happen, and we're grateful to all their contributions. And with that, I'd like to thank for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Wu, for a great talk. We'll open it up to questions for Wu, and then from there, we'll open up to questions for both of you. We have about 10 minutes to have a discussion. So are there any quick questions for Wu? So if there aren't, I have a question for you, Wu, which is, so the first, so you're showing a lot of model divergence in methane fluxes, right? And they were shown, I think, mostly over just like the entire year. But one of the things with like airborne campaigns is you have to sort of like pick a time of year to fly. So have
Right.
you looked at sort of the seasonality of like where are the biases the largest? Or is it like wintertime? Is it summertime? What like do you have like where are the biases the largest, I guess? When are the biases the largest?
Yeah, so specifically for except the study on winter restoration, we mostly focus on the growing season plus
Hmm.
shorter seasons, which typically span April to October because that was where when NASA carve and above
Hmm.
airborne campaigns collected most of the data. And for winter fluxes, we typically rely on the towers from NASA, NOAA, and Environment Canada to provide data.
Hmm.
And I would say we have a more complete view of growing season fluxes compared with the dormant season. So
Hmm.
based on the study on the growing season, we see that there's a lot of model divergence over the peak carbon uptake in the growing season, and also where carbon uptake happens when carbon uptake happens, like the shorter season timing. For example, some model would have carbon flux to start in April, but that might be too early because
Hmm.
the soil could still be frozen in the north slope.
Hmm.
And yeah, I would say winter fluxes are kind of challenging to evaluate because
Hmm.
we have fewer observations and less well-resolved data coverage.
Hmm. Great, thank you. Okay, I guess we'll open it up for questions. We have about 8 minutes. Thank you both again for great talks. It's great to see sort of the breadth of research going on up there. Questions from anyone? Go ahead. Does that mean I get to ask another question? Um, so I think so. My question is for Forte again, which is what I saw. So this is going to be more of an observational question, but I'm curious. What observations are you like? What platforms are you using? I saw ship, UAS, and airborne. Is that it? All three?
Yes, it is all of these and more.
Yeah, I was going to say,
What are the more?
and more,
So,
much more.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are going to be collecting measurements from airborne platforms,
Mhm.
both crewed and uncrewed systems. We're going to have the AVIS hyperspectral
Mhm.
instrument. We will be using hyperspectral instruments on drones. At the same time, as Dustin discussed, we're going to have a lot of satellite data sets, SWOT, PACE, OLCI, Sentinel-2, from hyperspectral data sets to higher spatial resolution, multispectral observations. And in terms of surface platforms, we will be having measurements from high-tech research vessels, but also from smaller boats in the rivers, in the river deltas. We will be deploying moorings and buoys for more continuous
Mhm.
observations in the coastal waters. We will be using autonomous systems for continuous observations in the rivers. And it's going to be this synthesis observations from all these different platforms that will allow us to capture the very dynamic processes across a continuum of rivers, deltas, estuaries, and the coastal ocean.
That's a lot. It's a lot of different assimilation types and error estimates.
Yes, yes, but it is what really is necessary in order to be
Mhm.
able to look at all these processes at the different scales, right, and the different resolutions we need to integrate so that we can capture the transformation of carbon and organic and organic components in the rivers, and the ecological, biological response in the coastal ocean.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question about modeling work. Do you have any intent to maybe use the observations to improve any known deficiencies in models?
This is a question for Forte?
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, right? We will be ingesting all of these observations. They'll be able to show us, how our parameterizations are performing, what we are missing. And, the ECHO team has a long history of ingesting observations and improving the models based on that, right? So I envision specifically the adjustment of the river delta fluxes, right, will be heavily informed by the observations, and also the adjustment of the Darwin model to suit the unique ecosystem along the North Slope coastal ocean.
So the downscaling is mostly the traditional way. Are you thinking of machine learning AI model?
We certainly have. We actually just got some additional funding to do further assimilation of the ocean physics in this region. And under that funding, there's some allocation to use oceananigans and GPUs, plus perhaps a machine learning approach as well. So that's something that, all of us as ocean modelers are transitioning towards. We're not quite there yet fully. But the idea of having machine learning emulators and also neural networks embedded within the ocean models to improve parameterizations, it's a key focus area right now, and it's developing rapidly. So yeah, it's definitely something we're interested in, and we will be carried by that thrust at some point, right? Moving forward.
Thank you. I also have a question for Wu regarding your conclusion about the methane. Like if found that methane is flux biases more than the CO2, I wonder, is this kind of knowledge transferable to lower latitude? Is that all because the change in over the Arctic, like the peatland or permafrost?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm not sure it translates to the lower latitude because I think they're characterized by distinct processes. Like in the higher latitude, you would have lakes being frozen and then thaw in the spring, and also to some extent we have fewer observations. Typically in the higher latitude compared with the temperate zone. And a lot of models currently don't represent permafrost and peatland processes very well. So I think that could be a major reason they show very wildly different responses. Also, I think in terms of the methane processes, you would have more diversity in how a model represents the processes, because for CO2 process, all the models they should have the basics like photosynthesis and respiration. But for methane, some model could be as simple as some empirical equations implemented there. So yeah, there's more opportunity to improve methane processes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Does anyone have any? We've got one more minute, a final question for either of the speakers. If not, thank you guys so much for great presentations. As a reminder for everyone, the recordings will be up on the IARPC website and on the IARPC YouTube channel in a few days. Thanks again and have a great afternoon.
Thank you,
Dustin,
Lauren.
Maria,
Yeah.
Woo, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you
you.
so much.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.